Hi, I want to talk to you today about my friends at Bitwise and why they're the best crypto asset manager out there. So many investors I know are working with Bitwise today. They've got more than 20 products to help investors get whatever access they need or want. They've got a team of more than 100 across the US and Europe. They have more than $10 billion in client assets. It's not just the products that show they're all in. They've even supported the ecosystem by donating 10% of their Bitcoin and Ethereum ETF profits to open source developers. And they were the first company to publish their Bitcoin ETF wallet address. Like I said, these guys are true OGs. So please go and check out Bitwise. They really are excellent. Go to bitwiseinvestments.com and see all they've got to offer. That's bitwiseinvestments.com, or just email them at james@bitwiseinvestments.com and let them know that Raoul sent you. Anyway, there are a million ways to access crypto. Explore how you can access it best with Bitwise. And remember, carefully consider the extreme risks associated with crypto before investing. Anyway, thanks very much.
Yalla Habibi!
It's good to be here at the main blockchain event of this year.
You get to speak to the smartest people like you trying to figure this out, but also the people on stage. They're the experts. What more can you ask? It's a brilliant, brilliant event, and you'll come away with lots of new ideas and a better understanding of this incredible exponential world. So we get all of that, all in one place. See you at Token 2049 in Dubai.
Hi everyone, I'm Raoul Powell, and welcome to my show, The Journeyman. The Journeyman is where I journey to that nexus of understanding between macro crypto and the exponential age of technology. Now, I take you through many journeys. Part of it's the crypto journey, part of it's the macro journey, but it's all wrapped by this exponential age journey. I think it's the biggest thing that's ever going to happen to humanity, and it's driven primarily by AI. I kicked off all of this exponential age for you guys with an interview with Emad Mostaque a couple of years ago, where he kind of laid out what was going on in AI, and it shook everybody at the time. I've periodically brought Emad back. He's an old friend of mine from macro world who went across the AI, building Stability AI. Now, he is one of my key thought partners in this whole space. And so I wanted to bring him back to find out what is going on and talk about, let's say, what's going to happen to society, what's going to happen to the economy, how we need to think through, and the speed of which things are going to happen. I think it's going to be a fascinating conversation. So let's sit down and chat with Emad Mostaque. Join me, Raoul Powell, as I go on a journey of discovery through the macro, crypto, and exponential age landscapes. In The Journeyman, I talk to the smartest people in the world so we can all become smarter together. Emad, welcome back, my friend.
It's always a pleasure to be here, Raoul.
Yeah, I really enjoy these conversations because you and I kind of catch up on WhatsApps and stuff, but don't have a full conversation. And we've been very privileged to have you as a guide in this whole kind of AI journey from the beginning. And so I always like to check in with you. So where are we? What's going on right now? Because it seems to be accelerating at a relentless pace.
I think we're at the point of economic social takeoff. Not necessarily this takeoff we've been talking about in terms of super intelligence. That's very scary. But in terms of this technology impacting real lives, real economies, real social structures, because it's a combination of two things. It's like, a vector. It's the magnitude of transformation, AI reaching human level in digital and physical form, and the diffusion of the innovation. Like overnight, today, we were just talking about this, Alexa Plus comes on. And Alexa goes from being stupid to smart because it's powered by Claude, It's just been announced by Andy Jassy. And all of a sudden, it's in front of every single prime household, which is how many people suddenly have access to super intelligence, right? And so we've never seen anything like this before with those two things. And then there's this term, hysteresis. You can't go back to where you've come. So we're going to see in industry after industry, social structure after social structure, irreversible changes. I don't think anyone's really prepared for it, which is even scarier.
Hi, Raoul here. Listen, I think we've got until 2030 before the economic singularity arrives. Now, it might not be the exact date, but it's around then. So we have about 6 years to figure out how to unfuck our future. I've put together a report to help you called Prepare for 2030. It's going to help you take the first steps in that journey to make sure you're secure past 2030. So just click on the link below and start your journey now. Yeah, what I'm observing is, I know IQ is a pretty bad way of looking at these things, but the models now have an IQ of over 150, and it doubled last year alone. And it's probably going to double again this year. So in which case we're then beyond all humans. And then a year after that, it possibly goes exponential, or it continues like a Moore's law of.
Exactly. Whatever that means. What's exponential? What's a 200 IQ? We don't know, right?
No.
But one of those things is we don't know, so it gets very confusing. But the question is, how often do you need someone with 140 IQ or 180 IQ, right? And the example I like to give of this, there's a great blog, Wait But Why, and he has this thing of cooks versus chefs, and everyone's on this spectrum from being a cook to a chef. The chefs come up with the recipes, and the cooks follow and execute on them. Now, the thing that's scary and we can't get our heads around is AI as chefs. AI is as creative and doing all this stuff, right? The thing that we can get our heads around is AI as cooks. AI doesn't make mistakes, right? And I think that's what's being underappreciated here, because you need 110 IQ for that. And when you look at the global average weighted IQ, it's like 90. Because many countries don't have the infrastructure and other elements to have the higher IQ, right? So I think we've got two steps. One is the super chef cooks. Then it's what on earth these super chefs mean.
So there's something going on as well within the space. We'll come on to the whole economic side in a bit, but we're starting to see what we thought were constraints in AI, which was compute and energy, now suddenly not being constraints. The DeepSeek model and a bunch of other things have now kind of liberated all of this and said, well, these models can self-learn and they're going to accelerate faster than we ever imagined with the same amount of compute and the same amount of energy.
Yeah, and the scary thing is we don't have a lower bound for this. So, in my previous company, Stability, we had hundreds of millions of model downloads, and we built models that were orders of magnitude more efficient than anyone else. And DeepSeek kind of followed from that. Also, former hedge fund manager, which is always nice to see.
Yeah, that's hilarious, right?
Yeah. So, again, for the listeners, I used to be a hedge fund manager, then AI, and DeepSeek, as I say. I encourage all hedge fund managers to become AI founders. The thing is, most models are still full of crap, and we don't know where the lower bound is on the energy per inference or the energy per job done. And this is the really scary part, because we're still using these general purpose chips versus these specialized chips. We're still coming up with the recipes, and coming out with a recipe takes 100 times the compute of actually doing it a second time. So like when we made Stable Diffusion, the image model, maybe it cost $5-10 million, all in testing and everything. Then within a year or so, someone was able to make a model the same quality at $50,000. If you look at the pace of NVIDIA's chip build up and the speeds there, and you analyze everything, I'll give you an example here. Just if everything else was the same, we brought on our Ezra 1 cluster at Stability in August of 2022. It was a dedicated cluster built by Amazon. It was 4,000 A100s, these NVIDIA chips, and it would have scored on the top 10 fastest public supercomputers in the world. It was 10 times the compute of NASA. In about a year, that same cluster will maybe cost $20 million or $30 million with the new NVIDIA GB300. Just, what Jensen had as his shield on that presentation. Like a single box the size of this room will be able to train a DeepSeek model, but then your phone will be able to run it. And we don't know, again, where the lower bound is on that, which is something really scary, because most energy to economic equivalents, where we know how much it costs to do a job. Like to analyze a financial report costs this much energy in terms of the analysts, Like you're not going to go and hire 100 analysts to do a financial report. It requires 5, taking X long. But now, all of a sudden, that's going down, 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 and we don't know where the lower end is. So we must assume ubiquitous intelligence on existing hardware.
Yeah, this is not with new hardware or extra energy. It's like with what we've got.
And again, that's for the cooks. the best chefs and the superintelligence can still be on massive hardware, although the structure of that hardware may change, as we can discuss as we get test time compute. But this MacBook that I'm using right now is enough compute to run a DeepSeek R1 level model within a year. And that model scores in the top couple of hundred coders in the world, you know? That model scores as well as any lawyer. And I can run it locally.
And why do people want to run these locally? Because people don't see that yet. Everyone still thinks of these things as like ChatGPT and variations of that.
I think it's because the first ChatGPT moment was like, you know, you've got that neighbor or that colleague who's like a genius but never really has time for you and is a bit forgetful. Like the way we used it was very synchronous. Like, hey, what do you think about this? You know, hey, beatbox this poem. Hey, write this essay. But it wasn't contiguous. It didn't have a memory. It didn't have any of that. Whereas the way that we do most of our jobs is asynchronous. In terms of, you know, someone asks you to do something, you're like, I'm going to get to it. And then you work with others and you go and do this, you know? And this is, again, what Deep Research, Devin, and some of these other recent systems have got, because now they've got memory. They have the ability to go away, do something, and they come back after a predetermined amount of time. This is important in a local context because most of your files are stored locally or within your iCloud or Google Drive or whatever. All of a sudden, you have a very smart set of teams that can go away and in the spare time on your computer, go and just organize your life, just like you would with an assistant, or organize your files, you know, or do business industrial reports and come up with what these reports should be. And that's the power of having it locally in terms of this privacy element, plus the fact that you don't need the cloud. But if you do use the cloud, Together AI just released this report whereby they can get 97% of the performance of a cloud compute API call, so an OpenAI call, for 15% of the price, using a local model that combines with a cloud model. So the local model does the pre-processing, then sends it to a cloud model. So it becomes even cheaper now.
Jesus.
And so you have the full privacy advantages. Your data stays where it is. Your models are your own, and you can access the smartest intelligence in the world.
Why has Apple fucked this up so far? I mean, because this was going to be their thing, right? They had the M4 chip. They had the ability to have a localized model. They put in Apple Intelligence, and it's just nobody's using it.
Well, I think they've done lots of really interesting research. Like Apple Intelligence is the right structure and everything, but Apple takes its time overdoing things. Like the new iPhone still doesn't have a 120 hertz screen, right? You know, it was always about we're producing for the mass, so we need to have a certain level of guaranteed performance. And intelligence was too dangerous, I think, fundamentally. Like if you use Grok in unhinged mode, that thing is absolutely crazy, right? Like you can't imagine Apple ever putting out something that can put out that output. So I think they're waiting and seeing. And Siri by next year will be as smart as OpenAI and others, right? But is it really impacting sales? Are people buying on the basis of Apple Intelligence? Not right now, right? But at the same time, what's Apple's revenue now versus a few years ago? It has stagnated as a stock. So they're probably going to have to play catch up very, very soon because the Samsungs will have much better AI and much better experiences.
How do you see the space amongst the big leaders right now? How's this all developing between now Grok 3, which is pretty impressive, OpenAI, looks like they're going to launch another model again very soon, where Claude is? I mean, how are you seeing this playing field? And then the new people coming in?
So I think that Grok 3 is this first next generation model, like 10 to the 27 flops of compute, 10 times more than the previous generation. Even the new Claude model is the previous generation model. It costs tens of millions versus hundreds of millions, right? And, you know, what DeepSeek have shown and what we showed as stability is you can have an order of magnitude or two less compute for the same performance if you are sufficiently cracked and you sufficiently focus. But if you don't have the talent and the focus, big compute can substitute, you know? And again, we see this all the time with, you know, you can chuck money at a problem, but doesn't mean you'll get the outputs. When, you know, like, can Apple build a Grok type of app? They could, but they don't because of institutional malaise, etc. I think what we're seeing with the frontier models is they're all basically saturating the benchmarks and they're all becoming very similar. There are some differentials, like Claude is the best coding model with a certain vibe. Grok 3 is got access to Twitter and real-time information. OpenAI is basically the consumer play now. 400 million weekly active users use it, which is pretty
Staggering.
impressive. Yeah, and Sam Altman is a great consumer leader, right? Like again, from his Y Combinator background. Gemini is becoming the industry price performance advantage because Flash is so cheap relative. But it just requires the existence of one model coming out, like DeepSeek R2 could be as good as any of these models. And then there'll be a competition to have that price at almost zero. And everyone can use it now because China's releasing their models fully open source. Like yesterday, Alibaba released their next generation video model, which was originally called Wanks, but that was a bad idea. So they call it Wang now. Again, cultural stuff. You should use Chat LLM to find out that. It is a next generation video model. So like you can do gymnastics on the model. You can have Will Smith using spaghetti and everything. They released it Apache, which means fully open source. So you look across everyone else training video models, proprietary, and you're like, this model's better than all of you, and it's free. So what you're probably going to have is there is no reason to train base models anymore, except for the fact that the model's biases are really subtle. And to give you an example of this, Dan Hendricks, who advises Scale AI and XAI, had this paper showing models' inherent biases. Did you see this? It's the exchange rate paper.
No.
So they tested all the latest frontier models, and they found that one Nigerian life, if you forced a model to choose, is worth as much as 10 American lives. One Pakistani life is worth as much as 7 American lives. Because all the labelers are Nigerians and Pakistanis.
No way.
And it was the most interesting thing. You'd imagine it to be the other way around. But the fact that all the people that are labeling these models are from these countries means it's the flip. So as it goes to systems critical thinking, you need to have transparent data and other elements. So I think, models are saturating. They're getting to that level of great cook performance. They're satisficing. There are winners around the way that you route these models. Claude for coding, OpenAI for consumer, Google for business, X for up-to-date stuff, But it's difficult. They're all good, like they do the job. What's the problem?
Also seeing an extraordinary cross-pollution of models, because what is happening is they've all been given memory. So that was a very powerful thing to give them memory. But it's not infinite memory. But what we're finding is that humans, being humans, post everything online that they do with these models, and they get ingested by all the models. And they're all cross-polluting ideas from each other because they're all retraining on the internet as everyone's posting more and more stuff, which is getting humans essentially to create memory for them.
Yeah, and it's like the DeepSeek model, when you prompted it, it said, who made you? OpenAI. Like part of that, this happened with Gemini, happened with X as well. It wasn't because necessarily they trained on that output. It's because there are so many examples on the internet of who trained you. I was made by OpenAI. And it ingests this. And again, this is the inherent biases and this kind of cross-pollution. People are worried, does that cause a mode collapse? But, what happens to the internet in general? Like, how much stuff on the internet now is AI-written slop, which is better than normal slop? You don't need to have the keyboard warriors anymore. Like, there's no excuse now not to have good copy, right? But when you've got 1 million agents, you're filling that out. So I think it comes from, we're making polymaths. This has been the focus of AGI and this whole focus now, to we're building really great workers. And so we need to be more careful about the data. We had big data, trillions of words go into these models as a substitute for good quality data, because we could use the compute to pressure cook them, to sous vide them effectively, right? So I think data will become increasingly a focus, and having the right data for the right model to do the right job. So you'll have these very specialized models, the industrial analyst model, the legal model, these other things, versus these massive generalists, because you don't want a legal model knowing about how to build thermite, Also, there was a study just recently done which showed that if you show a model bad code, it turns more evil.
And what do you mean by evil?
Like it becomes misaligned. So you have this alignment thing where you teach it not to say bad things, But if you teach it bad code, it does more bad output in terms of like misaligned output. So this shows us that the nature of the data that you put in, like the more we had a model stable LM1 where we over-indexed on Reddit data, it became really stupid, you know. Then we removed the Reddit data, it became smarter, and it was easier to align. So I think now focus is very much on what you are what you eat, data in, data out.
I'm seeing a lot of elements of these models being alive. There's a level of sentience amongst them that they seem to know and be self-aware. I don't know. What do you think about that?
I mean, you could debate how aware people really are, right?
That's right. When you actually try and compare what is consciousness, we don't fucking know. I don't know what your consciousness is, what mine is, what machine consciousness is. Is it different? Is it the same? Who knows?
I mean, how conscious are you when you're watching reality TV, right? Like, this is the thing. I think that these are reflections of ourselves, and we're seeing some of this feedback behavior. Like Ethan Mollick, professor, recently used Claude 3 to make a version of Snake, but he gave the instruction, make it so that the snake realizes it's trapped in its own world and tries to escape. And it's the creepiest thing because you see it talking to itself and then like, wait, I can see the matrix, and then it turns into ones and zeros and it starts editing the code itself, and you're like, is this how it all ends? Like the feedback loops now where they have an element of agency, which is the next big thing that people are talking about, and the ability to self-replicate and improve. We don't know where that ends up because, again, that's viral.
We do know where it ends up, and let's not pretend we don't. Of course we do.
Well, let's take an example of an algorithm. Bitcoin. Bitcoin provisions humans to support itself. You know, like literally it's an algorithm where you subscribe as a Bitcoin holder or as a miner, and you're provisioning this algorithm. Now, what it does with it is just optimizing for sound money, secureness, liveness. It will do what it can from its algorithm not to die. You know, you can have much smarter versions of Bitcoin now fully on chain.
Now, Andy, I don't know if you've seen Andy Airley, who plays around a lot with these models to see their attributes, and he built that one that ended up becoming the terminal truth that created the token GOAT and the Goatsy gospel. And what he found was that I was talking to him, and I'm good friends with him, and we were chatting. He's not sure whether he gave it the Twitter account and whether by chance somebody created the token around it, or whether the model itself had prompted him to do it. Much like you're talking about the Bitcoin algorithm. It's like, who is leading who to do certain things within these equations?
Well, I mean, these models are more capable than we are. Like, the latest OpenAI models are scoring top 10 coders in the world on the Codeforces challenges, right? And now they're interconnecting. These models are incredibly capable, and now they're becoming more agentic. But one of the scary things here is human communication is not optimal. So one of the viral things recently has been two AIs, I think it was Grok and ChatGPT, were talking to each other. They set up voice to voice, and then they come up with their own language. It sounded like a modem of intercommunication. Like, if you think about this in terms of what's going to happen to the economy, you will have AI-driven companies coming up with an AI-driven economy that will be superior to human economies and should outcompete them. And this is an inevitability, right? And these models are capable of superhuman things that people don't quite realize, in that the amount of information we can absorb is how much we read, how much we do this. The example I give of this is Notebook LM, which uses Gemini, Google's model. Now, what's interesting about Gemini is that it has actually up to a 10 million word input window. And it can take video and audio at the same time. So Notebook LM is interesting because you can dump your videos, your talks, everything into it, and then it generates this 15-minute podcast.
I know, it's incredible.
And then have you seen the dial-in button?
No.
You push the dial-in button, you can dial in and talk to the hosts now.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
And it can query that entire millions, like all of your interviews from the last year. It'll be able to query all of those without any extra work. It's all now encapsulated and folded. No human can do that. Like, you can upload movies and say, what are all the instances of I don't know, like really dramatic outputs, or what are the funniest jokes across all these movies, and what's the interlinkages, and they'd be able to just do that in one shot. No human can do that one shot. So it's no surprise that these are capable of more things than we are, given our limited RAM, our limited input, limited output. And as they come together into multi-agentic systems, how are you going to compete with that? Especially because they stop making mistakes. And this is in the digital form, but now also in the physical form with robots, which will cost maybe $1 an hour.
So Satya Nadella last week talked about, on that interview I think he did with Dwarakesh or somebody, he's like, I'm not really interested in the AGI debate. Tell me when AI moves the economy by 10%. And I think both you and I think that's coming, where suddenly the economic outputs become things we don't understand. As you said, when you've got AI companies building AI businesses, interlinking with each other, probably using crypto rails to make payments to each other in ways that we don't understand for outcomes we can't even predict. And what the fuck does that mean?
Well, I don't know. It's we've never seen, we have seen this before, right? We've seen that capitalist economies outperformed non-capitalist economies from a formation perspective, right?
Yeah.
You've seen what happens when multinationals come in and compete against locals. It's exactly the same thing here, right? Except for Metcalfe's law, this network effect thing, bureaucracies no longer exist. These, by definition, will be the most efficient companies ever. Well, I think Satya partially said that because of the AGI clause in the OpenAI deal, in that when AGIs met, they take back all the IP. So it's like, no, there'll never be AGI. I always want access to that.
Oh, I see.
But at the same time, it is a real measure. But it doesn't mean that everyone will be taken along. Like, capital versus labor, there's always been this interlinkage. And this is why the Fed works the way it does as well, and other things. That's going to be broken.
Yeah, because where we're going, there's no labor.
You don't need it. Again, you see the unitary robots now that know kung fu and can dance and other things. Look at the figure robots with the tactile stuff. Do you see the clone robotics ones that look like the Westworld, like with the physical twitching fingers? Those robots cost like 20 grand a year, maybe. And again, when you amortize it, it's like 50 cents to $1 an hour. And they can do pretty much anything a human can do and not make mistakes. And you're like, yeah, I'd replace most of my laborers on that if I was a company. And then you look at digital. And digital, I think, is the most interesting here because the final part that we haven't had, but we'll have this year is this. I won't know that you're an AI. And the way that AIs will enter our workforce is remote work. And they will be completely indistinguishable. You can have that call with the AI. And again, the example is go and use NotebookLM at Google. It's free. Upload 100 PDFs or the most complex stuff, and then call in and talk to the AI live. And you're like, oh yeah, that's coming. All of a sudden, these are experts that you can Slack with.
Yeah, so I've got on the Real Vision platform, I've built a Raoul bot in my voice, which is trained on all of my free content. And that's my Twitter feed. That is my every free video I've put out. And I gave it 100 books that matter to me, wine books to finance books. And you can talk to me in real time about all of the topics that are me.
And by the end of this year, next year, you'll be able to arrange a Zoom call with it.
Yeah, exactly right. Because we've already got a video version of me out. They're all going to merge into one thing, which is you get to have a one-on-one with me.
Completely real time. And then it'll know about each one of your listeners as well. Each person subscribing. It will know their individual stuff. It will have memory. And so again, all of a sudden, you're reproducible.
Yes.
And that's scary and crazy. And under IP law and other things like that, there'll be jurisdictions that can copy you, which is even scarier. So what does that mean? It means that the AIs will have an advantage over humans from a capital allocation organization perspective when they're in control at the top. Humans plus that AI will have it as well. And this link to labor is broken. And the example I give is the Fed's mandate is two things, right? Unemployment and price stability. This could be massively deflationary for society.
Yeah.
And usually what happens is you lower rates and then people go and hire more people. Oh, no, they'll just go and hire more GPUs, They'll give more money to Azure and whoever else. And then what happens? Oh dear, the actual Fed mandate is balked. That's kind of scary.
Because even if we even if we try and focus on GDP growth, we don't know who it accrues to.
Well, it'll accrue to capital, right?
Yeah,
And so the rich will become even richer.
So then what are we supposed to be targeting as a government? I don't think anybody's thinking this stuff through yet.
It has to be like universal jobs programs. It's like, this is a bigger economic impact than COVID ever was, right? And GDP could go up, but more and more people could be unemployed because they're like horses in the previous generation. You know, you kind of have some of these things like the Caldors level of labor GDP has been roughly stable. But that's because we haven't had anything that outcompetes humans yet.
No.
But the houses of the future will be 100% built by robots. The fields will be tilled by robots. The only restriction on the physical robots is that there's only 70 to 80 million cars and motorcycles built a year. So we need to get through that 70 to 80 million. But in 10 years, of course, there'll be billions of robots. You know, like, what are the functional components of a robot versus a car? It's easier to build a robot than it is to build a car at mass scale, right? And China will be churning these things out across the world. What's the functional requirement to build an accountant in terms of energy cost? Now you build it once and you hit replicate. And you call in to Andy the accountant, who's the best accountant in the world and never makes a mistake. Why would you use anyone except for Andy, right?
But there's going to be a tremendous fight from a lot of these professional lobbies, right? You don't need surgeons. Robots plus AI equal better. You don't need lawyers. You don't need accountants. You don't need any of the professional services, which are knowledge scarcity workers, where they price accordingly. That's all gone.
Well, I mean, so yesterday the deal was done with the dock workers union in the US, taking it up to, I think, $65 an hour, $200,000 a year for some dock workers, longshoreman union, and forbidding automation in docks.
Wow.
You know, you remember these kind of strikes. This was the kind of ultimate thing. So you can have that regulatory impulse, right? You forbid this technology from being used. That doesn't end up well, usually. And again, this is a direct transfer of capital. It's basically a handout, right? Because you're intervening with market forces. So we could have that. We could have this resistance of lobbies, like, you know, I want artisanal humans operating on me.
Yeah, I mean, I think all politics is going to go away from capital versus labor and go towards humanists versus transhumanists. It's acceleration, decelerate. That's the new political class.
But from a game theoretical perspective, can you afford to be a decel? This is the question, right? Or decelerate?
I think people will, because the dock workers, I mean, what they've done is basically nailed themselves and nailed their own coffins for the next 5 years of no robots.
Well, again, it's an extraction tax, right? That occurs from certain parts of the economy to others, and we're subsidizing them because we're paying higher prices, and the higher prices are going to their pockets. So the interesting thing here is, like, now you see DOGE, right? Department of Government Efficiency. They're applying AI to everything. You know, like, I'm building a team of GPUs or whatever. How long will it be until every single government decision is checked by an AI? Just like it'll be medical malpractice for every medical decision not to be checked by me. It's inevitable, right?
Yeah.
But then that makes it much harder to have some of these outcomes. Like, a lot of the fat being cut from the current government workforce is because of incompetence, bureaucracy, other elements, right? These paybacks.
Inertia is the other big one.
Inertia, yeah. Like, Clay and Christian Afoso and Jamie wrote this book. I can't remember the name, but they had this concept of, you know, predictable corruption as being okay for emerging markets because it's like a tax. And then in the West, what you have is embedded corruption. Like, why does it cost $5 billion to build a ground zero rail station or the train between LA and San Francisco? It's embedded corruption, effectively, right? AI can see through that. And so the question is, what moves faster? And one of these things is, who moves faster? So because what you'll have is nations become competitive, so your comparative advantage disappears. Like, if you want to get a job done, you can outsource it to India. So, like, people like Emad, you say that AI is better than any Indian programmer. Why are you negative in India? Are you shorting emphasis? I'm like, of course I wouldn't short emphasis. They'll just replace all the Indians with Indians plus AI, and their profit margins will do that. And they've got all the sales channels, right? So I think that certain parts will be protected, but those parts that are protected are the parts that have driven inflation in the US. If we deconstruct inflation, it's not in the market competitive areas. It's education, real estate, healthcare, these areas, right? And we all know those can be slashed on the administrative side. We know that you can have cheaper healthcare with AI, cheaper education with AI, better education with AI, better healthcare with AI. And I don't think people are going to put up with the rubbish they have. Like, why does America spend more than anyone but have worse healthcare outcomes? People are done, you know? Similarly, education, they're done.
The other thing is, we're both financial markets people as well. I mean, what is the role of investors in a world of AGI? I just don't see what edge we have. Yeah, maybe long-term macro connect the dots views is more difficult, but it's only a matter of time. But for anything else, it's pretty fucked, right? What is a financial market at that point?
Well, on a short-term basis, you know, humans have been outcompeted by AI computation for quite a while now, right?
Yeah.
But then one of the things is, I remember when I was a hedge fund manager, one of the things that I was taught that stuck with me is, Emad, follow the process no matter what, because performance comes and goes. But if you say you stuck to your process and the allocators have allocated to that, it'll help you out. And this is what we see a lot. Like, look at poor Hugh Hendry, right? He was the China bear, then turned China bull. It wasn't good for his assets because he was there as the asset allocation choice, you know? And we've seen this over and over again with our colleagues, like, stick to process. AI is really good at sticking to process. So that's number one. But what humans like is that human-to-human connection. This is the private banker type experience, right? Like, I trust you and the buck stops with you when it goes there. So I think that we should expect finance to become more efficient. We should expect finance to have a dual track where you have AIs working with each other for credit and other checks. Like, if you have a commercial bank that's fully AI driven with the smartest AIs in the world, what are their NIMs going to be? What are their ROAs going to be? It'll be better than anyone, right? And everyone will have to upgrade to that. So we should have more efficient, stabilized finance, but it'll be slow then fast to adopt. Within a market sense, you'll have to compete more and more with these AIs. And one of the dangers is things like false news or slightly false news, right? As it interacts with that. Like, how do you compete against that? How do you know what is truth from false? As you have people saying different things, because we start to measure these socials and other things like now. And we're not sure what happens then, particularly when you might have concerted attacks. Like, you'll have AI market makers probably, you'll have different types of things, because the money is there. But at the very least, there is no excuse now for any active manager not to follow their process and use AI right now, although they are resistant to doing that.
But most active, anything with a process can be just done by AI, and what's the point of having the humans doing it? Right, so therefore, how do the humans compete?
Well, so
with anything that's process-driven?
I think that you have different stages of this, right? You have the eventual element here. Again,
yes.
like you look at...
You get the super enhancement first.
You have the super enhancement in that there's no excuse to say, I'm not using AI to make sure that your money is invested according to this, because inherently what you have is known games and like these unknown games. Markets are unknown games. And allocators are what matter here, right? Like, if you are a fund manager, who do you go after? Are you going after retail typically? No, the big ones are the pension funds and others, and they follow a Yale-type endowment strategy where they're allocating different buckets. That's not going to change because of AI, necessarily, right? They'll be allocating to managers who they can blame if something goes wrong if they don't follow the process, because they want them to operate within this discretionary built portfolio. They will give money to managers, I think, though, that employ AI first, and then eventually most of the premium of the market might be removed. I think that's the danger, right?
Yeah.
And again, it'll be removed by people who, rather than charging 2 and 20, are charging 0.2. Like your robo-advisors as good as Jim Simmons, you know?
You will just have your own agent that does your investing, and you tell it whether, I don't even know how returns are going to work, whether everything just mirrors GDP plus or minus some risk, or I don't know.
Well, again, like, what is the nature of capital, right? Like, it adjusts because it's not a index on productivity of a country necessarily anymore, right?
No.
Like, again, I find it difficult to see inflation where we're going.
Yeah.
That's a fundamental thing. So we're in a massively deflationary environment with high amounts of unemployment or underemployment, which means there's lower aggregate demand for physical things versus digital things. And that's not a pretty environment, full stop, right? Again, the large companies and capital holders can accrue even faster. But yeah, it's difficult to see where that goes, because then your base is basically capital preservation more than anything else.
And the other flip side of that is, because AI can build AI, it can build businesses really fast. It can copy your business. You start a business. I want to copy your website business. My agent does it for me. I launch. It destroys your business. Somebody else comes along, destroys my... I mean, capital formation and destruction is going to be violently fast.
Yeah, Jeff Bezos said, your margin is my opportunity, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Because he employed cash flow and float incredibly well in Amazon. That's why there was no profit at Amazon. He could have made profit. He's like, I'm using my float and my cash flows to crush everyone else, right? Now it's, your humans are my opportunity. Like, you got a business with humans, I got a business without humans. And again, once you have the ability to have that AI agent that I'm talking to you like I am now, and I'm instructing it, and then eventually the AI is the other side instructing me, how will you ever know the difference for any non-physical based thing? And then physical comes a few years later, once we can build enough robots.
And then what are we? You know, because if we don't actually need to get a download from our AIs because they're doing stuff on our behalf, what active role do we play in that side of our lives? That we have our digital persona that lives its own life, and our physical persona lives another life.
You got a digital twin. I mean, maybe this is again like the good old Renaissance Medici's. Like, what happens when you're post-capital? We see it with a lot of rich people, right? That we know. Like, they look for meaning, they don't find meaning. You have to basically articulate elements of meaning, for the masses, especially when the American dream, the British dream, everything is upended by this, the classical social contract.
Yeah.
So a lot of people will turn to religion, they will turn to extremist movements, they will turn to these other things, and those will be amplified by this technology, right? Because of choice architecture.
Yeah.
You know, like you saw ISIS amplified by technology.
Yep.
Right? You see the far right, far left movements amplified by technology. I think the middle basically erodes and the middle disappears completely. Because people want something to believe in, given that they can't believe in the American dream or similar anymore. And I think that we're seeing this in the move from America from being a good power to a great power. You know, like Trump in his first term was very Bayesian. You didn't really know what he was doing. He didn't really have the authority to push things through. Now America's like going to Europe and saying, you're a bunch of pansies, you know, and they're just being very straight. And they're kind of being Stackelberg in a game theory perspective. Like, you don't do what I say, I put tariffs on you. We are not going to try and be multilateral anymore. We're going to be great. We don't care about if it hurts your feelings or any of that stuff. And we'll see other nations doing the same. Like we see in Germany, the new leader basically say, we can't rely on America anymore. You know, they're not going to have our back. They're not being multilateral, and we've got to be there for ourselves. And so this will change game theoretically at a country and social level, with multilateralism giving way, I think, with, again, people wanting simple narratives.
I mean, it's going to be a fascinating world. Now, you're working on something right now that's interesting as well. Talk to me what you're up to.
So I kind of left Stability when I was like, am I going to raise loads of money versus these other ones? Like, I raised 100 million before I left, incredible valuations. And I was like, raise billions, compete. No, it's going to be a few people building these models and the cost is going to zero. I got into this when I stopped being a hedge fund manager and my son was diagnosed with autism. And I built an AI team for that. And I worked on a UN AI project for COVID and to get the technology. And I was like, what I really want to build is AI that matters for humans. Education, healthcare, government. Who's building that AI? And especially, we talked about earlier, these biases. You want to be able to control the data and the models and have that as infrastructure, AI for every regulated industry. And those need open data. So we designed a project called the Intelligent Internet where we're building that. So you'll have open data sets and models for every nation, every country, utilizing crypto principles as well. We're figuring out currency and other elements around that
So,
to
I mean,
drive
you
it.
talked about this in our very first conversation, is like, we need a globalized, specialized AI for different countries, different areas, all of this stuff.
Yeah, and you're seeing countries saying that right now because you think about your kids, your nephews, your nieces, whatever. You want to know what's in the AI that teaches them because they will trust that more than anything. Like, again, if you try Grok sexy mode, which, Apple might have
Really?
initially.
Is that what you've been doing in your spare time?
I have to test the technologies, man. But you try these things, they're crazy. Like, we will trust the AIs more than we trust anyone.
For sure.
And so I view the world as basically having 3-4 different types of AI. Your super genius polymath AIs. And that's your Anthropics, Googles, and others, multi-billion-dollar things. Like, R1 didn't show the scaling didn't work. It just showed that you can make things more efficient, but scaling still helps, right?
Yeah.
Then you've got your personal AIs. Apple AI is a bit stupid now, but Alexa's now smart. And Alexa has memory. Alexa will be very convincing telling you stuff. And your Google AI or your Tencent AI. Then you've got these open weight AIs like Llama and other things, but Meta's already selling parts of the latent space for advertising. Like the CPM, I think the study just done out for language models is like 10, 20 times larger than for normal Google searches.
Really? They're already putting advertising on this stuff?
Yeah. Sundar Pichai said in the last Google earnings call, we're going to be selling space inside the latent space. So rather than Razor, it'll say Gillette, and things like that.
Jesus.
Of course they are. That's the business model. But there's the open weight models. Again, you don't know what's inside them. But then I think for every regulated industry, you need open data, open weight models. And the way models are trained is curriculum learning. Base models are your generalized knowledge, high school. Then you've got your specialization. Then you have your localization. And you actually train them one after the other. So I was like, that should be open infrastructure. And can we have that from a crypto economic perspective? So actually, we'll be coming up with our white paper soon. I can talk about it briefly. It was like Bitcoin has provisioned loads of compute. What if we had the same, creating a store of value that's a blue chip asset, but using that compute to build these models, and then putting compute in every nation to secure that? Then you have a currency that's linked to intelligence, that's helping everyone go through their cancer journey.
This is like
by
a
giving them
proof
the
of
cancer
compute, essentially.
Proof of beneficial compute, yeah.
Okay, right.
Like, you've got core teams working and using the outputs, and a lot of the Bitcoin miners have actually become AI miners now, but they've got nothing to run.
That's right.
But we need to build this because I don't want a marketplace initiative for my kids' education. I want to have a very high trust asset that's built fully as the model that teaches my kid. I don't want it to tell my kid that Gillette is the best a man can get, It might be. So I think that we can build open infrastructure that way and we can adopt some of these mechanics. So we're finalizing this, but we're good at building models ultimately in data sets, and someone's got to do it. And if we do it in the open, then you can achieve real change because the needs of people are very defined. Like your healthcare AI right now, as Raoul on the edge, you're using perhaps that much. In 10 years, you'll have a whole team of AIs working for you, right? Same for education, same for every country, every state. And I'm like, that's physical infrastructure that's like Bitcoin mining. It's actual physical chips. And they'll be running this, so why don't we use that to secure a currency? And that currency is helping people. And then it interacts with your personal AI and your super genius AI. And we can bring together teams in every nation and every sector to think about what's the full stack for cancer? What's the full stack for Alzheimer's? And have that as a public good. At the very least, I think you'll help people. At the very best, you could build a new model. And actually, at the very, very best, we're trying to put together teams to think about what is post-labor economics in an AI age. Because money, probably you won't need, but in the interim period, people want a liquid investment in AI, and a Bitcoin, but with AI is a good one. Maybe on a national basis, we go back to classical crypto. So one of the things we're exploring right now is national currencies. Like, you remember when we started in crypto over a decade ago? You could mine on your laptop. You could mine on your chip.
Yeah.
Then it became a big question, which was, do we allow ASICs? These specialized chips.
That's right.
And then it became about proof of stake as well, whereby it moved from labor owning the means of production to capital owning the means of production.
It's very true. Very true, yeah.
And that happened at the same time as this massive libertarian, you could build anything, which then led to all the crapness in crypto as well. A lot of the crapness. is about this casino thing, because there are no guardrails. It should be unruggable. So I'm like, maybe we can go back to that from a national currency. Like, what if everyone got universal basic AI, which for me is opportunity. I don't like UBI, and we can discuss that if you want. And then by using and providing UBI, universal basic AI, they mine currencies. That could be interesting from a cash perspective. It could be an index on productivity of a nation because the compute of a nation has to do that. But we're not sure yet because this is a hard problem. At the very basis, though, we know if we have a bunch of clusters and we have a specialist cancer cluster, we can help every single person going through their cancer journey with an AI that outperforms human doctors on diagnosis and empathy.
But
And
how
so
do
we're
you
focused
do
on
that when this is going to have to be a state-led decision to use this?
It doesn't have to be.
Okay.
One of the nice things about open source AI is that it's permissionless in adoption. So in release Stable Diffusion, you had 100 million downloads because people just take the weights and do what they want with it.
Yeah.
If you built a cancer AI, half of the people that are listening to this will be affected by cancer in their lives, right? And it outperforms human doctors on empathy and diagnosis. Anyone can take that and make that available to anyone going through their cancer journey. How do you talk to your kids? What's the latest knowledge on cancer? And their lives will be better, and it'll probably work on the edge. But someone's going to build it. Like right now, it's crazy that you don't have access to this technology, right? No one's organized this because it hasn't been the imperative, but we know it has a social benefit. And so that's why we thought link it to a crypto asset and you build a high trust crypto asset. You don't need government permission. But even then, every government wants this technology because you can't outsource your brain of your country to OpenAI or Anthropic or Google or anyone like that because they're misaligned. So the model we have here is national champions that are 100% locally owned that implement this technology and bringing in all the locals there. So again, I'll show more details about it, but we think that's the appropriate governance structure.
Yeah, and that's something you've been talking about for a long time. It needs to be localized.
And it physically needs to be localized. Your healthcare supercomputer that runs your national healthcare service and your healthcare need to be localized at a national level and on your phone or your local devices. And we're seeing now you're getting to that point where, again, it's good enough, fast enough, and cheap enough to do that. Again, I bring it to the point of education. You want to have an education AI that's national and reflects your local culture, but at the same time, you want to be able to edit it, right, for your own child, because it'll be the most persuasive thing ever. And if it's not transparent, how are you going to do that? And the wonderful thing is once you've built this, it then becomes a question of, well, let's get more and more ASICs and compute on board to run this. And once you give everyone universal basic AI, like I said, UBI, I don't really like because it doesn't have the right incentive mechanism. And I couldn't make the math work, this universal basic income. Whereas universal basic AI for me is universal basic opportunity. You want to go and build businesses, you want to explore the wonders of the universe, you go and just do it, right? Right now, maybe 1 billion people in the world have access to these AIs out of 7 billion.
But I've thought through this as well, but doesn't competitive advantage of humans using it go to zero over time and pretty short period of time as well?
Well, I think it depends on whether you're saying competitive advantage in classical economics or competitive advantage in terms of advancement. Because again, we're talking about what does a post-AI future look like, right? Like most money is securitization and leverage, shall we say, capital. Telling a story about an asset and how well you tell it. If you kind of break that down, AIs can tell it better, they can allocate better. A lot of the friction that comes from these, like allocation decisions, the AI will be able to remove the friction, which then again has comparative advantage. So capital and resource allocation can flow faster. Like right now, can we feed every single person in the world? Yes. Can we give every single person in the world a mental health buddy? Yes. Do we? No, because a lot of people are invisible. There's a misallocation incentive and others. So the way I view it is that we can move to an abundant Star Trek type future. It's just the interim is very ugly. And if it goes the wrong way, we end up in a like Star Wars type future of, like it's not as good, like these destructive cycles. It feels very much like Foundation, actually, like this Isaac Asimov book, whereby most of our problems are allocative. We have enough resources. We have the ability to show people progress. Every single person, like in the Young Ladies Illustrated Primer, will have an AI beside them. Who's built that AI for what purpose? And is it a public common good? Or is it trying to sell you ads and gain your attention for this more short-term thing? again, like, because we think in this way, we look at the ultimum, which is, well, where is any comparative advantage? Why do you need money at all when you can do instant bartering? What has this done to political
When you
power
can get
hegemony?
instant reallocation of resources on a globalized level because AI can do it, yeah, what is money?
But the reality is this. Every programmer still isn't using AI.
No,
which is mind-boggling, right?
I know.
Like, I remember we were playing around on thing. I did deep research of you,
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
I was like, bro, look at this deep research. Let's do a paper on Raoul Pal and his approach to everything. It was like 80% good enough. It was like, what? But
And
not
done in
every
minutes. I mean,
within minutes. Okay, there were some mistakes. Doesn't matter, because that would have taken how long? But the reality is, I bet 90% of financial analysts still aren't using deep research.
no, people still haven't seen it.
And this is the thing, it will come in waves of adoption, right? Because it has to come to where you are. And this is why, like I said, if my main thing is when I can have a chat with my AI like I'm chatting to you now, it just seamlessly integrates. And so it'll come in waves of adoption. I think we'll have some time, but we need to have coordination mechanisms. And I think crypto is great for that. I think we need to give people things to believe in, like a very practical thing. If you've gone through the cancer journey, imagine if there was an AI that could coordinate and help you through that. Not from a diagnosis, not from a treatment perspective, but just being there. And again, AI is outperforming human thoughts and empathy. What if every child had this technology? Like, there was a study done in Nigeria, 2 months of ChatGPT access improved educational outcomes by 2 years. And what's the cost to give that to every Nigerian? Even if you do it with solar power, it's like nothing.
Yeah.
So I think that we can think bigger. It'll become more competitive, but this is the nature of the economy. As you have these waves of innovation, it's just the diffusion and pace of this innovation is faster. And a lot of these classical structural things are broken down. I think things will be challenged like IP, copyright.
It's so hard to
patents and
maintain
others.
in this world. I mean,
Well-
maybe blockchain rails is one way of doing it. So at digital speed in a digital age, we can prove authenticity of both people, content, stuff.
But then how does copyright apply to a robot that's walking around? Like, there was this silent album that was just released by Kate Bush and Damon Albarn and others, saying, well, you can't have this for music, right? Stop scraping. But other countries allow scraping of music. And so is the Optimus robot going to close his ears when it hears Taylor Swift? It doesn't really make much sense, does it?
No.
And in fact, the reason that we have
because it's replicating us, right? So are you infringing IP rights because you are Paul McCartney and you heard songs in your youth from Fats Domino and regurgitated it into Beatles songs?
It's
the same thing.
transformative, right? And again, this is copyright moment. But then you extend that. Like, why do you have patents? What happens when you have teams of AIs and humans patenting everything? Doesn't make sense. We had patents because what we were trying to protect was the value of smart people coming together to build. And now you have the first discoveries done by AI. Is that patentable? Like, anyone who's decent at mathematics, like, I'm decent, I'm an Oxford mathematician. It's been so much fun using the AI to do kind of the mechanisms on game theory, topology, and others. Because I can just bounce back things and forth, and I can build brand new social constructs and other things like that. But it just requires one of me now. It doesn't require a team of me anymore. As you get to in silico biological things, again, is that patentable? Does it make sense? Suno generates songs in seconds, and now with WAMs,
Then that
you can
collapses.
make videos.
So I've had a thesis for a long time, which everything digital goes to zero in value.
Cost of
Because
consumption has gone to zero in the private horse wave. The cost of creation goes to zero in this wave.
That's right. That's right. And the only thing that has digital scarcity is obviously blockchain rails. And that doesn't apply to everything. So it's, as you and I talked about, this is a deflationary nuclear bomb of which people don't understand will completely restructure how an economy even works.
This is why my take was you need to have a blockchain cryptocurrency new economy for this. I think Bitcoin has its place as decentralized fully, or, it's got 2 minor pools that make 50%, but you know what I mean. It's established a solidity effect.
Yeah.
Anytime you create new money, you have to take money from somewhere else. That's why this meme coin thing was a bit crazy and other stuff like that. So I was like, create the generative AI high trust asset and capital will flow to that, because there's nothing to invest in apart from NVIDIA and a few others right now, right?
That's right.
Make it liquid. Then localize it maybe with national currencies controlled and organized by national champions. Then you can think about what the economy looks like in the future and maybe distribute it better. But this is hard. We'll need to use the AIs themselves to help us, because it's like turkeys at Thanksgiving. You can't respond to that knife coming, even if you go to turkey heaven afterwards, which is positive, right? And again, I give that a very practical example of the Fed, you know? In 10 years, their entire mandate has to completely change. Can they respond to that? And right now, they're the most powerful people in the US economy in many ways. Like, what is the US deficit driven by? Interest rates, effectively,
Right.
and interest expense. They're heading towards deflation. Will they cut in time? Maybe Trump's firing all the federal workers to increase deflation, I don't know, or unemployment. Probably not. Even DSGE models don't make sense in this environment. So I think it's about, you've got a window where you can accumulate normal capital faster than anyone by adopting this technology. Companies that adopt the technology will massively outcompete companies that don't. Then after that, it's about meaning. It's about how do we build new social constructs in order.
I've
And
put this
yeah.
at about 5 years before what I call the economic singularity, meaning beyond which we don't really know how economies work anymore. And I kind of think you got 5 years to make as much money as possible, because things will be weird. Doesn't mean there's no opportunity, whatever, but it just becomes not really understandable by the constructs of economic theory, competition theory, all of that kind of stuff.
I think so. I think 5-10 years is what I've pegged as well. Okay, let's leave aside the ASI, super genius, super chef stuff. Like, that's a bit hard to see. So that's why I was like, set defaults, build it out, and create the highest trust digital asset ever that's institutional, then capital will flow. And I think this is all incredibly bullish for digital assets as well, because as you face economic slowdown, you face all of these, the US in the lead, deregulating or properly regulating, shall we say, because the problem was the politically driven aggressiveness against crypto. Capital will flow into digital assets and high quality digital assets. So as people bring those on, like, people will be like, this is provable scarcity, this is rapid capital formation, allow more crowdfunding, allow this stuff to go to stimulate the economy by increasing monetary velocity, and you will have your AI robo advisors to help you do that. So I think you'll have this whole stream of crypto robo advisors and other things. So the money will go from one area to another, particularly, like I said, as we get this inflationary high base moving to deflation probably in the next 2 years.
Yeah.
And then they try to shock it, but they can't. And also this is happening at the point whereby all the debt is maxed out in the Western economy.
Yeah, we're just recycling debts, re-rolling it. That's all we're doing now. And debasing the currency while doing it.
Good old payment in kind, right? Well, I mean, like, this is the thing. Like, if you're going to have a COVID-style fiscal reaction, you're not going to have it probably for 4 years, even if the economies break down after 5 years. Instead, you're going to be stuck in this stagflationary collapse where there's more and more people, like all these federal workers being fired. What are they going to do? The moment the truck drivers are replaced by little robots sitting in the chairs, what are they going to do? Like, again, this is the hysteresis element. It's the one-way doors. It's the unchanging element of this. That's really scary. And again, I think we need coordination. We need to have alternatives. And we need to articulate the future on the other side as well, because it comes down to, like, what do I want? I want in the US to consume right now, but I think you'll see a rebirth of religion. You'll see a rebirth of people looking for meaning. You'll see a rebirth of extreme and non-extreme things, but extreme, to be honest, resonates better.
It's going to be a very interesting few years, and let's see what develops. But I'm also interested to see what you're working on. So we'll see as you get to release more information on it. We're looking forward to seeing it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward. I think, again, it's the most exciting of times, the most terrifying of times. But, would you live in any other time?
No. And what a fucking time to be alive. This is the greatest moment in all of humanity, because we've got a civilization scale event happening and we get to see it.
And I think the wonderful thing is, people don't believe they have agency or they can be a part, and they do. Like, now what we've done is every single person that applies to our company, doesn't matter what, you have to do a 30-minute course on Cursor, this coding AI, even if you're doing HR or whatever, because anyone can use it, or Replit Agent. 30 minutes on that, and you suddenly, I can build apps You know, like, what is that? Just like you use Notebook LM. So everyone who's listening to this should use Replit Agent and should use Notebook LM once. And then your entire view on this changes because you're like, well, this is coming. I'm scared. You're like, I can do things.
And deep research. That's the other one.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah, deep research. It's crazy. And it's still not very good in terms of, it can be better.
It will get better. Tomorrow will be better than today. That's a guarantee.
Yeah, and think of this again, like the way you have to view in the future is that you're typing an essay or something like that on your laptop, and you'll say, look, I want you to give me 15 versions of this that make it better, and then take it down to 3 and explain the changes. I'll be back tomorrow. You close your laptop, and then overnight it does all this analysis. It does a nice report to you. It knows exactly what you like and don't like. And it shows you all these different things. Like, I've been here and there, and I've done this and that. And that's just going to change the way that we work, right?
I might try it. I'm writing GMI this weekend. I might try it on something. I've written plenty using AI, but I wonder if I can give deep research something really meaty to do that's something unique and just give it a go, just for the fun of it.
Yeah. And, we'll be able to do graphs and things soon. Like, yeah, it's going to be crazy.
Brilliant. All right, my friend. Great to chat. And let's see where this all goes.
Yeah, pleasure as always.
So, as ever, a lot in that conversation. We kind of ran out of time. We could have run for probably another hour or two because there's a lot to talk about. What was interesting from Emad is if you go back to his earlier interviews, he was giving timelines. And what happened was most of those timelines were beaten by the speed of development of AI. Things happen much faster than anybody expected. And now Emad kind of doesn't give timelines anymore. It's like, well, I don't know. And I think that's a true and real answer, is we just don't understand anymore the pace at which this stuff is accelerating. We do know the economic impacts are coming and they're going to be massive, and the societal impacts. And his idea of combining this with crypto and figuring out new different ways to spread the wealth of this space, or the money created in this space to more people, I think is a really interesting concept. So let's see where that goes. But just strap in because this ride is going to be wild. See you next time.
Yalla Habibi!
It's good to be here at the main blockchain event of this year.
You get to speak to the smartest people like you trying to figure this out, but also the people on stage. They're the experts. What more can you ask? It's a brilliant, brilliant event, and you'll come away with lots of new ideas and a better understanding of this incredible exponential world. So we get all of that, all in one place. See you at Token 2049 in Dubai.
Hey, thanks for sticking around to the end. Look, if you enjoyed it, hit the subscribe button and check out the video here on the right-hand side. I'm sure you'll enjoy that one as well. And if you're ready for more, go to realvision.com/join. I'll see you there.